Hello, this is Kathy Bert of Bert Gallery, and welcome to part 2 of the private art world of Louise E. Marianetti. In 1936, Louise headed off to New York Art Students League for further training. She writes in her letters that she had learned all they could teach her at RISD and needed more advanced art training only available in New York. Many an artistic voice is lost in art school and graduate level study as an artist negotiates technical mastery of multiple media, artistic philosophies, and teaching methods. But it was in New York that Louise Marianetti melded a strong Italian heritage, deep Catholic religious faith, and prideful self-confidence into a personal identity that guided her painting technique, subject matter, and style of painting. In the pre-World War II era, where realism dominated the art world, Marianetti settled into the labor-intensive media of egg tempera, casein, and silver point drawing. These media were not for the faint of heart artist with average technical skills, and all were media she learned and refined at the Art Students League under the tutelage of Robert Brackman and William Palmer. In the 1930s, many American artists embraced egg tempera, and there was a revival in the study of Italian Renaissance works. The academic art centers at Harvard, Yale, Kansas City Art Institute, and the Art Students League led the way. Marianetti's instructors at the Art Student League, Robert Brackman and William Palmer, were at the center of this revival spearheaded by Kenneth Hayes Miller and Thomas Hart Benton. In this slide, we see two important examples of Marianetti's egg tempera work, both painted on panel in 1942. Her mentor's works, shown here, had a profound influence on the young artist. In 1937, Marianetti took the Portrait and Still Life course by Robert Brackman, and in 1938 she took the Life class by William Palmer. Beginning in 1932 through 1943, Palmer would use his egg tempera media to great effects in large-scale murals he executed during the Federal Art Project that employed artists and emphasized the role of arts in American life. Louise kept handy a technical manual from the Federal Art Project in her notebook for reference. Marianetti worked prodigiously at her craft and was a natural fit for both egg tempera medium and the revival of interest in Renaissance methods and theory. In a newspaper review, she commented, quote, "There are 50 layers of paint on that portrait. I worked until 11 o'clock at night for 4 months so that I could complete it in the time allotted me." End of quote. In the art lesson, she used her young cousin Mimi as a model. Her subject matter remained figurative throughout her career, but during her New York years, a narrative subtext was introduced. Her choice of objects, such as the Polynesian tiki head, is kind of bizarre, often throwing the viewer off balance. What is she trying to tell us? What was she thinking? A frequent question asked about her work post-1939. Another example of Marianetti's mastery of egg tempera on board is Thumbelina and Friends. Again, you are struck by the mastery of realism, but something else creeps in. You sense that Marianetti is using this media to transcend the viewer into a magical or fantasy world. At the 1943 MoMA exhibit curated by Dorothy Miller, American's 1943 Realist and Magic Realist, the curator discussed this trend taking place in American art. Quote, "It is limited to pictures of sharp focus and precise representation, whether the subject has been observed in the outer world, realism, or contrived by the imagination, magic realism." End of quote. Magic realism was further defined by MoMA director Alfred H. Barr, Jr. as, quote, "a term sometimes applied to the work of painters who by means of an exact realistic technique try to make plausible and convincing their improbable. End of quote. Now, Louise Marianetti is probably horrified by the designation of her as a magic realist. In fact, she stated in one of her undated papers, quote, "My work is not dream state, they are thought state. There is a conscious elimination of all useful detail. Only the elements actually of use to the painting are retained, and the color is arbitrarily conditioned by the mood of the creation as it develops, conveying a spiritual and emotional feeling that I feel necessary." End of quote. Thus, Marianetti would imply that this nymph, submerged in an exotic underwater sea world, is, quote, thought state, not dream state. For many, this position is suspect. Perhaps Marianetti felt her imagery was not fantasy or dream state, but many viewers are not convinced. This is the end of Part 2, The Art Students League, Louise Marianetti at Bert Gallery.